Hey guys, this is Stephanie and I'm Stacks on Stacks on Stacks. Today I'm coming to you guys with my statistics from last year. Now I always love statistic videos. I love figuring out what my statistics were from last year, and I love watching other people's videos as well. I think I wore the same sweater last year for my statistics video. Well, at least it still fits. But on to the numbers. I do find it super interesting what I did read, breaking it down, all that good stuff. And it helps me kind of mold my resolutions, which my resolution video is already out, so you guys can watch that. But I feel like my statistics kind of tell me what I have been reading versus what I think I'd been reading, so it's always kind of a fun way to look back at my year. So without further ado, here are the numbers. I read 117 books last year in 2018. I actually only read 83 in 2017, so apparently having a booktube channel for a year makes me read more. Go figure. I read the most in May and August. It was a tie for the most reading. I read a total of 38,246 pages. The year before, I had only read 29,000 pages. The shortest book I read last year was We Should All Be Feminists by, I'm gonna get this name wrong, Chimamanda Adichie. And it was great. It was only 50 pages, but it was fantastic, and I'm pretty sure I gave it 5 stars. And the longest book I read last year is 1,006 pages, which was Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. And this one was only okay. The average page number per book was 327 pages, which isn't bad. It just kind of showed me this year that I do tend to read some shorter books, and I kind of want to challenge myself to read some longer books in 2019. The year before, my average was 341 pages, and I think quite a bit of that was just because I read fewer books. The most popular or highest rated book I read on Goodreads was Crooked Kingdom with a 4.62. The least popular book, according to Goodreads, was Zenith, 3.12. And a side note, I usually get this email from Goodreads at the end of the year, and they're like, or the beginning, I guess January 1st, and they're like, hey, do you want to know all your reading statistics? Here they are. But they didn't do that this year, and I waited for the email. I waited through the first, I waited on the second, and by the third, I was like, okay, so they're just not going to send it to me. Then I got on Goodreads, and I couldn't find it. So I basically just tracked down all this information on Goodreads and counted things because I wanted to have the information, and they didn't hand it to me this year. So I worked hard on this, guys. Super hard. My average rating that I gave books was 3.6, which I would say is pretty good. For me, if I give you a 3.5, you're a pretty good book. If I give you under 3.5, I'm probably not going to reread it at any point in my life, when I'm also probably not going to keep it on my shelf if it's less than a 3.5, unless it's part of a series or something. So you have to be a 3.5 or better for me to keep you or want to reread you. So that's a pretty good rating for me. I had 21 books that I gave a 5-star, 48 I gave 4 stars, 33 I gave 3 stars, 12 I gave 2 stars, and 1 1-star book because they won't let you do 0 stars on Goodreads. So I had a lot of 4-star reads, which is kind of typical to me. I can really enjoy a book, but it takes a little bit extra for me to push it over into the 5-star category, but that's just me. And I do have kind of a different rating system of how I rate books. I do use point whatever, like 4.2 or 4.3. I'll do that with the rating, and I'm fine with that. I have a personal rating, and those are the ratings that I'm talking about today. Those are my ratings that are on Goodreads. If you look at any of the reviews that I put on Goodreads, you're going to see a personal rating and a technical rating. My technical rating is how I view the book technically. So though maybe I didn't like it, I might say it did have good writing. That's going to go in on the technical. Or I might have had a few preferences, or there might have been a character that was irritating. I'm going to put my personal rating down for that, but not the technical. Whereas if it's a poorly written character, then I'm going to dock the technical on that one. I hope that makes sense. Quite a few of you guys have actually asked me about what's the difference between your personal and technical. I try to be very objective with the technical and more judge the work as a whole, whereas the personal is how much I enjoyed it, and that is the rating that I tell Goodreads. Last year I read 53 YA books, 4 middle grade, and 60 adult, which really surprised me, except that I remember about halfway through the year, I just got really mad at all YA books and I just stopped reading them, which would be why the rest of the year I probably read more adult books. I just kind of got frustrated with a lot of the YA tropes, and I feel like sometimes the writing's not as strong when it's YA, and I feel like the authors almost think we're stupid, and because they put YA on it and the cover is fun, we're gonna think it's a great book, and it's not a great book. It's a mediocre book at best, and it's poor writing, and it's usually lazy writing, and that's the writing that irritates me the most, when I have read something by you and it's good, and then I read something else and it's just kind of like you didn't care enough to actually write something worth reading. It frustrates me. So I am more willing now to read YA than I was 2 months ago. I'm still going to give myself a little time before I dive back into the YA world, just so I'm not super critical about those books, because that is not fair. And I have my breakdown for the genres of books as well, and this always interests me quite a bit, my breakdown. So I technically read 11 classics last year, but I didn't give myself a classics category. I put my classics into other categories like romance or mystery or sci-fi or things like that. Like Jane Eyre, I put under romance. I didn't really like it, but that's not the point. The point is I put it under romance, and quite a bit of my Agatha Christie's I put under mystery. Now you see where I'm going. So I don't have a classic genre, but I have the rest. And there were a couple books I really felt fit into two genres, so I did put them in both. So if you add these up, it's going to be more than 117, but have at. I read 10 contemporaries, which very much surprised me. But when I thought about it, I was like, yeah, I did read 10 contemporaries. I read 10 nonfiction books. I read 32 graphic novels, which is great because I actually have a goal to read more graphic novels this year, and hopefully I'll just keep that up. And when I say graphic novel, I mean graphic novel and manga. I read 9 historical fiction, which is fewer than last year, but I enjoy historical fiction, but I have a hard time reading like a bunch of them in a row. A lot of times they can kind of be heavy hitters, and I really like World War II historical fiction, and that can be a pretty heavy subject just in general. So I kind of have to put space between when I read those. So 9 isn't bad. I wouldn't mind reading more of that though this next year. I read 10 mysteries. I'm going to tell you most of those were probably Agatha Christie. I read 4 romance. 4! And people think that I hate romance. I don't hate romance. I hate bad writing. And I find that books that just circle around romance, generally it's not enough for me. The plot's not enough, and the writing kind of irritates me. So I read 4, and that's pretty good. I read 17 sci-fi. Quite a few of those were due to the Tome Infinity and Beyond Sci-Fi Readathon that I participated in, which actually there's another one going on this month in January, and I kind of had to choose between participating in that or filming videos, and I chose to film videos. Hopefully I'll be able to catch the next round of the Tome Infinity and Beyond Readathon for sci-fi books, because it was so much fun, and it just has these great creative challenges, and it gets me to read sci-fi, which I totally enjoy. So why don't I read more of it? I don't know. And I read 27 fantasy, which doesn't surprise me at all because fantasy is like my comfort zone. Fantasy is, if I want a book and I want to enjoy it, I just kind of slip into a bit of a fantasy book and I'll be a pretty happy camper. So the most read was graphic novels, the second most was fantasy, and then the third was sci-fi, which is pretty typical. I am kind of that all-around reader. I am that person that reads all the genres. I generally enjoy reading a wide variety. My channel has been described by that by numerous other booktubers as the booktuber that reads everything and anything and is honest opinions, and I appreciate that title. I do. I'd like to think that I have integrity with my opinions, and I like to think that I communicate them well. So I have 2 statistics left. The first one is page length. I read 5 books that were 100 pages or less last year. I read 22 that were between 100 and 200. Between 200 and 300, I read 21. Between 300 and 400, I read 34. Between 4 and 500, I read 21. Between 5 and 600, I read 11. Between 6 and 7, I read 2. And I had 1 that was over 1,000 pages. This statistic really showed me the length of the books that I'm reading. I'm reading a lot of books that are between 2 and 500 pages, and I have the ability to read bigger books. I think sometimes they intimidate me because I look at them and I'm like, I want to read this book, but it's huge. And if I read that one book, then I'm not going to be reading 3 other books because this book is 900 pages. So I'm going to miss out on 300 pages book. You get what I'm saying? So I think that that's in the back of my brain is this book's going to take me 3 weeks to read. And then I'm only going to have 3 books for my whole month of a wrap up. And it's going to kill my reading challenge. But you know what? those are some really amazing books, and I need to not let that intimidate me and stop me. If I don't hit my reading challenge because I read 10 books over 1,000 and I miss it by 4 books, you know what? I read a lot. It's all good. I liked what I was reading. It's okay. And so I want to read 10 books that are 600 pages or longer this year. So if you have recommendations for those, by all means, let me know down below. I have my eye on a few, and I'm probably going to put out a video maybe in February. I haven't decided when, of what those books are going to be. And what I'm probably going to do is have a pool of like 20 books and just pull from those, because we all know that I am a mood reader and I won't do well if it's like, you have to read these 10 books. I just won't do it. I won't do it. Yet again, why my statistics are great, because they help me understand what I'm reading and improve, in my opinion, what I am reading. And my last category is the year the books were written in. So I always think to myself that I never read the books that are newly released, and I'm really not very good at following new releases either. I'm really bad about knowing like what books are coming out this year, and all these people are putting out videos of books I'm looking forward to this year, and I'm thinking, I haven't heard of those, or who is that, or I just don't track with it super well. So I don't usually think that I tend to read those newer books, but surprisingly enough, I read 15 books that came out in 2018. Now, some of these books do come from book boxes that I am subscribed to, so I know that I tend to want to get those read. So I imagine that's where the 15 come from, and then a handful might have been books I was actually looking forward to, but it always surprises me how many recent books I read. I also read 17 out of 2017, which is crazy because those are still fairly recent reads. And again, I always think, oh, I don't read the most recent books. I guess I just need to come to grips with the fact that I do. I read 15 from 2016. I read 8 from 2015. And then I started chunking by 5 years because, yeah. Between 2010 and 2014, I read 22. Between 2005 and 2010, I read 18. Between the year 2000, 2005, I read 7. And then from there, I went like 90s, 80s, 70s, 60s, you got it. 90s books, I read 3, 80s, 1, 70s, 0, 60s, 1, 50s, 2, 40s, 4, 30s, 1. Those are probably all Agatha Christie's, let's be honest. And then I read 1 book from 1890, 1 book from 1895, and 1 book from 1847. So I did get a few older classic books in. So basically a third of what I read has come out in the last 3 years. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just surprises me when I read those statistics. I'm like, really? Really? I read that many new books? But I do, because those are the books people are talking about. Those are the books that tend to be more relevant to the now. So I think that's what I gravitate towards sometimes. I just don't want to forget those books that came out in the 90s that are great, or the books that came out in the 50s that are classics. They deserve to be reread. They deserve to be recognized, and I should probably do more of that this next year. So thank you so much for watching all of my number statistic-y video. I love filming these every year. It's one of my favorite ones to film. Please feel free to leave a comment down below. I would love to know if you tallied your books and you know what genre you read the most of. I would love to know that, or what genre you would like to read more of this year. That always interests me. And I also like to know what your longest book was and what your shortest book was that you read in 2018. Don't forget to like and don't forget to subscribe. Please leave your comments. I love your comments. I post 2 videos a week. You never know the day, so you're gonna have to come back to find out. And I'll just look forward to seeing you guys again later. Goodbye.